Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I can't quite adjust this microphone here, so I'm going to just try to stay here and lean over it so that you guys can hear me and it gets recorded on the video for later. So just kind of an introduction to this topic really briefly before we get in here so you can make sure this is, kind of where you want to be. Over the past couple years, I've been working with some really talented content creators. And I work more on the SEO and analytics side. And so we found that there are some holes that, we're trying to fill in for each other when our content creators are trying to create this great content that then can be reached by people and found on the search engines. So this topic goes over a little bit of those SEO details that you hear SEO people going about and talking about, but from a content creation side and how we can fit those together. A little bit about me is I'm Amy Shropshire. Don't worry about the last name. If you see me, you can just call me Amy. There's a reason my parents gave me a super, super, super short first name with a last name like that. I have an Associate of Applied Science in Media Creation and Technology, a Bachelor's in Advertising and Marketing Communications, a Master's in Marketing, and certificates in Leadership Development and Nonprofit Management. I like to say that I can take this whole creative marketing idea from design and art and then be able to take it all the way through to the business side. So I like to take that holistic 360 approach of looking at how we communicate and being able to fit all of those pieces together. So in my work life, I'm the Managing Director of Marketing for Cask Communications. Cask Communications is a marketing agency that works primarily with startups and nonprofits. We prefer to work with organizations that have very little money because they let us be more creative with the money they do have. We're working with bigger companies. They're like, this is the way we want things done. Here, just do it. Smaller companies are like, we don't know what we're doing. So it's kind of fun to be able to go into those companies and say, you don't even have an idea of what's going on. You have a vision of where you want to be, and we can kind of come in and help them shape that. And I'm also a faculty member in marketing at Columbus State Community College, where I teach different marketing classes, and I'm actually now open sourcing a lot of our content. So we are taking away textbooks. So students don't have to buy textbooks. We're using readily information that we can find to be able to provide them a cheaper, more accessible course. So what are we talking about today? This was a little cartoon I found on Moz, which Moz is one of the best resources for search engine optimization and this content marriage idea. And so we've got our things, while social media profiles are getting a lot of engagement, we need a blog. Why? Or because blog content, let me know when you're done. And I see this a lot with clients that I work with. And they're like, well, we're getting a lot of traction. People are interested in us. So we need to start a blog. We need to write content. We need to have these things on our website. We need to bring people in. But then they forget the SEO piece. And so sometimes SEO and content lives in these two little disparate bubbles. And so when I've come into some organizations, they have really, really great content, but are wondering why it's still not bringing people in. And so that's where I can come in and kind of help them and say, we can take this content you've already gotten and kind of tweak it in ways to help it better show up and reach the right people. So just so we have a level playing field, I want to talk about the different definitions that I am going to be using to kind of approach this topic. So when I'm thinking of content strategy, I'm thinking it concerns itself with the visions. It's the strategy. It's the big picture. It's the ins and outs of why your content will be created, managed, and eventually archived or updated. So that idea that you have that strategy of we're going to have these different types of pages. We're going to have blog pages, or we're going to have product pages, content pages, information pages. That's your content strategy. On the other hand, we've got SEO, search engine optimization. That's the practice of increasing the quantity and quality of traffic to your website through organic search engine results. Like I said, I get clients quite often who have great websites built and written, but they're wondering why no one is coming to them. And they're like, but I put out this website, that's all I've got to do, right? Google will find it, it will show it to the right people at the right time and at the right place. But the trick is that you can actually go in and help Google, one, decide what searches it should show up for and when it should show up for those searches. So they really kind of need to work together. And so often these SEO and content pieces live in separate bubbles with different people, and you have to try to bring them together, and you're speaking different languages. I go to my content creators and I'm going, well, we have on-page SEO we need to take into consideration. She's sitting here going, I have no idea what this means. I've just been told to write this article, and it's a beautiful article. Let's just put it up there. So we're going to go over the first thing, which is this nice little pie chart from Moz. Again, I said Moz is a really good resource, and I have this in my resource slide at the end for you guys. Moz did a survey because Google does not tell you what is exactly in their algorithm that it decides the search results. But we've got some pretty good educated guesses. So this is what Moz came up with as its educated guess of what goes into showing up a web page in the search results. So you can see there's quite a few different squares up there that go into making this whole total score. But when we're talking about content specifically, we're going to focus on this red one and that blue one right over there, the 14.94% and the 9.8%. That makes almost a quarter of the reason why a website would show up. All the rest are non-content reasons, like age of the website. You know, an older website is going to be considered more authoritative than a new one. But these two sections are specific for content. So if we look at page level keyword agnostic features, that basically just means the content length. So longer posts are going to be perceived as being more informational than shorter posts. Google is going to look at a page that has 300 words as compared to 600 words and say which one is going to give the user more information. So there's typically a sweet spot when you're writing content where it's not too short and not too long, that you want to try to hit that content in. So Google says this has a medium amount of information, not too little, but not too overwhelming. That's going to run between 600 and 800 words for a typical page. You're going to have readability. So it's going to look and say, is this something that is easy for the reader to look at and read and comprehend? Or is it sentences, you know, we work in government here, is it sentences that are 20 words long, a paragraph that is all completely one sentence? They're going to look and see what is the readability of that page like. Is it unique content? I run into this one a lot where they'll say, well, we need the duplicate content from another page, but we need it in a different section of the website, so we're just going to copy a page from over here and put it in another place. Google's going to look at that and say, but this isn't unique content. This is duplicate content somehow. And it's going to say, maybe it's not quite as relevant for it. And then load speed as well. Google is really getting on the bandwagon behind how fast does a page load. They really want it to be quick for their users. They're finding if it takes more than 3 seconds for your page to load, there's a really high likelihood that people are just going to jump out. On the page level keyword and content features, which is this red block here for about 15%, we've got TF, IDF, topic frequency, inverse document frequency, which is just a long way of saying if you have a website and you're trying to target a specific term or phrase and you only have that term or phrase once in your entire website, Google's probably going to assume that your website's not about that topic. I have a client right now who has a certain keyword that he really, really wants to show up for, but it's only mentioned once on his website, and we keep telling him, well, we then need to look at the content. If you want to show up for this keyword, we need to start putting this keyword throughout your website more. So that TF-IDF, we want to make sure we have those words we want to show up for in the content that we're actually writing. And sometimes that keyword is not the keyword we want, it's what our audience is using. For example, one client I had was located in Columbus, Ohio. They were a furniture bank, so you could donate your own furniture to them and they would take it someplace else. So they served all of Franklin County, Delaware County, all of Central Ohio. So they were very sold on wanting to be able to say on their website, Furniture Bank of Central Ohio. However, when we looked at our search data, we found people weren't searching Furniture Donation Central Ohio. They were searching Furniture Donation Columbus because that was the major city, but we weren't showing up for search results because Columbus was nowhere on the page because they were like, we're not just Columbus, we're Central Ohio. Well, we kind of have to tweak that back a little bit and make that compromise between saying, okay, this may be the actual truth, but what our users are searching for is something a little different. Topic modeling scores on content. So that's where they're looking at how we have our site organized around topics. If we have topics that spread all out, kind of people are searching for them everywhere, not knowing where to find certain topics, Google is also going to have a hard time connecting those pieces. So they want to see a site that has really good architecture and hierarchy of where you're going to find your pages, because if Google can easily find where those pages are and how they should fit into the navigation, then they're going to assume that users are going to have a good time with that as well. And then content quality and relevance. And this is a hard one, but really where it comes into the content creator to be able to help with. When I'm looking at analytics for a website and I'm looking at our bounce rate in and of itself isn't really a useful metric, but what bounce rate can tell me is if people were finding that content quality or relevant. If they're coming into our website for a certain search term, but landing on a page and immediately bouncing, I know that there's a discrepancy there between the keywords we're showing up for and what people are actually looking for. And we can tweak that content. So I have an example of that one a little bit later on where we discovered that a piece of content on our website blog was one of the top search results in Google for a search term we had never even considered, but the content that was in there was completely wrong for what people were looking for. So we'll get to that example in a little bit. So one of the reasons why I always talk to our content creators about why SEO is important is because we are never guaranteed a spot on Google. We are never guaranteed to show up in those search results. Have you ever searched for something and then the next day forgotten where you found it and thought, oh, I'll search for it again, and it doesn't even come up in your search results, and you're going, it was just there? Google updates its algorithm to show those search results 500 to 600 times a year. So for us SEO people, that drives us absolutely batty because we never know what we're up against. So again, a resource from Moz. I put the link down there at the bottom, and these slides are also in on the website at GovCon. You can actually go to this Moz weather forecast for Google and see how volatile the search engines are that day. So what we use this information for is we will go back to our analytics data, and if we're seeing a whole bunch of turbulence in our analytics data, like, man, our views are really down this week and we have no idea why, we're going through, we can't figure out, we didn't change anything on the website, but our views are down by 20%, what's going on? We'll also compare it to this weather report, because if they're showing us, see some of those spikes there, that means there's more difference on those days where there are spikes in the search engine results than you normally find. So we can look and see if there are correlations between our analytics data and the Moz report. We know that there's probably not much we can do, and we literally kind of have to weather out the storm, so to speak. But if we're noticing changes on our analytics that aren't corresponding to the weather report, then we know that maybe we need to tweak some things on our website. So for those of you who are content creators and not SEO people, I wanted to go over some of these ideas that SEO people talk about and how we can integrate them into our content. And the first one is we've got on-page SEO and then off-page SEO. Where it really is going to affect content creators is this on-page SEO aspect. So the first one we want to look at is the actual content itself. So we want that content, again, to supply a demand. That's pretty easy. So we want to have a good reason. That cartoon where it was like, let's have a blog. Well, why do we have a blog? Well, because everyone else has a blog. We want to make sure that we have a good use case for bringing those people in. And Moz, again, is a good tool. We can search actually for our competitors and see what keywords our competitors are being found for and start to shape content around those keywords so we can have a little bit of competition between us. But one of the biggest things we want with our content, especially from an SEO perspective, is we want it to be linkable. One of the biggest ways that Google decides whether to show a page in a search result is if it has links pointing back to it. Those backlinks are basically a referral system for Google. And so if your website has a link back from Wikipedia or from the New York Times or one of these organizations that their website has what's called a high domain authority, then they're going to pass some of that relevance onto you. Google's going to see that as a referral and say, if this site over here that we think is highly credible is passing information back to this site, then this site must be highly credible as well. So you want that content that you're writing, you always want to be thinking of it in terms of how can we make this something that can be shared easily? How can we make this something that we can have another website link back to our website? Another one is title tag. So oftentimes this just ends up being the title of whatever article or page that you have, but this can actually cause some problems. So I put 60 characters up here because that's kind of the easy way to remember what you want your title tag to be. But I was talking to Abby earlier, it's a little bit more complicated. It's by character width of your title. But that's really super hard to remember. So we just say, 60 characters, you'll probably get in there. But the example I have up there, you can see on the top one, is actually 77 characters wide. And all of it fits in the title tag. That would all show up. Whereas the second one below it is 42 characters long, so it's even under that 60 characters. But the width of it in pixels is wider, so Google cuts it off. It's a strange thing. So if it cuts it off, you'll see those ellipses, and that is why when you look at the best practices for your title tags, those pipes up there are usually recommended to be your divider lines rather than a hyphen or an asterisk or anything like that, because those pipes are very narrow and you can fit more information in on there. So if you're looking at what dividers you want to use for your title tags, those pipes are a really good one because they're so narrow. But that is your title tag, what's going to show up. And you typically want to make that, again, 60 characters. You probably want to have your brand in there, your primary keyword probably in there at some point. So if you're looking at all your title tags when you go back and look and they're the entire article or this huge long thing, it's not going to hurt you in the search results necessarily, but it's not going to help you either. You want people to look at those results and click through. So when I work with my content creators on content that we're putting together, we always have the title of the page, but then we have a separate area where we're saying, okay, what's our title tag going to be? So that we make sure our title and our title tag align and are both useful. Obviously, we don't want to overdo keywords. We want this to be human readable. This is our first conversation we get with our viewer. So we want it to be in a language that they understand, but that Google can understand, that kind of balance between machine readable and human readable. And give every single page a unique title. One client I was working with, every single page of their blog had the same title tag, main URL / blog / article, whatever. And so they were having a lot of difficulty sharing those articles, getting them up there, getting them to show up. So you want those title tags to be different for every single page that you have, which is sometimes a chore when you've got a massive website and you're going, how can I possibly take a multiple 100-page website and make each title tag different? But it really helps with your SEO when you're doing that. Put your important keywords first. Again, because Google will cut off and truncate those title tags depending on the space that it has, you want to make sure that the most important stuff is first. So typically that's primary keyword, one of your dividers, secondary keyword, one of your dividers, and then your brand name. So if it cuts it off, usually there's other ways that they can tell your brand name, so it's not quite as important, but you get those primary and secondary keywords in up front. And then take advantage of your brand. Do try to include your brand name in there so that people know that this page comes from you, it's authoritative, and they're going to get the information that they needed. Again, write for customer first. Yes, this is going to Google. Yes, this is showing up in your search results. But you want to make sure that this is, again, the introduction of this page to your reader. So you want to make sure that you have a good introduction to them. The next one is the URL, and this kind of falls into the same camp when I have content creators who are uploading content and, randomly generated, automatically generated URL. And so you end up, again, if you have a really long title for your page or your blog, your URL can sometimes end up being this very long URL that you've got. So you've got your title tag there, and below it you've got the URL. And so what's interesting about being able to focus on the URL as a piece of content in and of itself is sometimes that's all you're able to show. If for some reason your title tag doesn't show up, so say somebody is emailing a friend and you copy the URL and send it to a friend, and that's all you've got in your email is this URL, you can easily look at it and be able to read and say, okay, that's a review site, and it's a review section, and it's a review on the Canon EOS 6D. Easy. Sometimes you get those links that are mailed to you or shared with you, and you're going, what is this link? It's like this long, and I can't tell what it is, and is this safe to even click? I don't know. If you focus on your URL as a piece of content in and of itself, there's a lot of information that you can share in it. So it doesn't need to be that full title. It can be a shortened version. It could be a keyword version. But again, in our paper, when we're writing content for our website, we've got not just the content, not just the title of the piece, but what we're going to put in our title tag and how we're going to represent that in the URL so it's clear to the person. Another reason to use that is Google does like to see the keywords in the URL. So you can see in this example, there's a couple that are highlighted in there. So Canon is highlighted, DPR review or DP review is highlighted. So those are all keywords that Google is going to pick up on. One client I have is very confused as to why his main website doesn't show up as well for a particular search term as another website he has. But the reason his secondary website shows up better for that key search term is because it is the URL. He has that keyword as the URL, so when people search for it, it's one of the first ones that comes up. So we want to make sure that we do put those keywords in the URL and think about that as another piece of content. And then it also looks well as anchor text. This is again where we're sending the link without any idea of what the content is itself. When we look at the idea of anchor text, Google is looking as what words do people use to describe the URLs. So when you go to a web page and you see a link that is words and not the full URL, Google is tracking what words are being used to describe that link. And so they're saying if people are using the word, how often do we go click here to access more information? Google is looking and saying here doesn't mean anything. That's a really bad anchor text to use. So Google wants to see these descriptive words used to describe the links that are being clicked through. And if we have a URL that already has the keywords in it, they can act as their own anchor text, and we don't even have to worry about what words are being used to describe that link. So image alt text is on here. First of all, because of accessibility. We want accessibility on our website, so we want to have that on there. But Google also looks at that image alt text to decide where to show images up in searches. And those images are also a piece of your content. So we want to make sure that those images can be found as well. Now, Google can probably tell that this is a picture of a man in a suit, or a dress shirt, tie, and glasses. But what even more descriptive if I'm searching for Jim Halpert pretending to be Dwight Schrute. That image would then be able to come up a lot more easily. So we want to be very descriptive in our alt text and not just logo, not just picture. We want to be able to, again, think of our images as a piece of content in their own right and put descriptors and words that are going to help our users find them when they do their searches. I don't know about you, but my searches have become much more visual over the years, that sometimes when I'm searching for a piece of information, I don't even use the regular Google search. I go to the image search because it's a lot easier for me to search through and look through those images just at a quick glance than to sort through all the words. So this is becoming increasingly important in having people be able to find your content and be able to see then the words that go along with it. So just a quick mention of structured data. This is going to be, if you're interested in it, from schema.org is a really good place to find information on structured data. This is just another way to give Google insight into what your content is about. And it can help pull out some of that relevant information. So I did a screen grab over here of, again, for Moz, because I was doing a lot of searching for Moz stuff to write this. And this little sidebar that you sometimes see over on Google results is all pulled from structured data that they have included in their website. So this is another on-page SEO element that you can work with your developers to put into the code of your website. But it will help Google understand this is a phone number, this is a date, this is an event, this is a social profile. It's able to pull out Twitter. So it pulls out your founders, subsidiaries, types of business. That's all things that Google is able to parse out of your website using structured data or schema.org. So off-page SEO. When we move over from on-page to off-page, on-page we really have a lot of control over. Off-page, not so much control over, but if we've got good content and a good structure, makes the off-page a lot easier. And like I said earlier, backlinks are probably the biggest way that Google decides whether a website shows up in search results. So this is one that my clients always hate when I bring up, but they're not really going to show up in more results if we don't get these backlinks. So that's why it's important that your content is structured in such a way that it is easily shareable. Because every time somebody shares your link, every time somebody publishes an article with a link to your website in it, that counts as a backlink. So other ways of doing offsite SEO, social media marketing, guest blogging, linked and unlinked brand mentions. The unlinked brand mentions still help because Google is still able to track those words that are being used, and influencer marketing. So we talked a little bit earlier when we were looking at that pie chart that one of the things that Google looks at is how your topics are organized together. So I wanted to bring up this idea of pillar pages and topic clusters as a way to organize your websites. And you probably have some form of this already. When I work with our content developers and we're putting together a plan, this is really helpful for us to even keep in mind as we do it, because it's so easy for us to say, oh, this is a cool topic, we're going to write about it, or we're going to put this on our website, and not think where it fits into our whole hierarchy. So this is an idea that you have a pillar content page in the center. So if you remember when I talked about page length and how Google sees page length as different, this center section with pillar content is going to be a long page. It's going to be more along the lines of 1,000 words, 1,200 word page that covers almost everything in that topic, but in a very shallow way. That's your intro page. And then from there, everything kind of related to that is going to branch off to the side. Google really finds this way of organizing content as very helpful because it is able to say, this is our big page, this is our big topic. So if somebody is searching for a broad info on this topic, we know we can send them here. And then it can kind of narrow down and get more detailed from there. So the example I have for this one, if we look at home remodeling, this center section can just be an overview on home remodeling in and of itself. What is home remodeling? What are the things you have to think about? What are the considerations that you have to do? And from there you have different articles or pages such as best time to complete a home remodel, mistakes to avoid when remodeling your house, home remodeling ideas and inspiration. So you can see how they all fit together, but you've got this pillar page that they all kind of rotate around. A little bit different from a landing page where you may have a landing page with a call to action right on it and it doesn't really go anywhere else. This is kind of like your landing page for your content. So you're looking for that broad topic, and then we're going to help you narrow down that broad topic into the exact details that you're looking for. So the one example I was talking about earlier, where we're looking at keywords that we hadn't considered and being able to tweak our content to be able to fix. So I check the analytics for this particular client on a weekly basis. This is the report I created in Google Data Studio to be able to just quick check on a weekly basis. What are we showing up for? What search terms are people using? This data comes from Google Search Console. And then I tie it back to the Google Analytics data to see where they're going, what search terms they're using, what pages they're looking at. And what we noticed, so we've got the brand name, which is first, which is pretty normal. The second one we looked at, we were like, feedback and testimonials. Okay, that's kind of odd. Our website has nothing to do with feedback and testimonials. You know, what is this coming in? Then we started noticing that even though it had kind of small numbers up there, it was consistent week over week over week. The search term feedback testimonials kept bringing up our website for an average position on Google of 1.29 every single week. We were one of the top results on Google for feedback and testimonials. And we're going, this is really weird because we're a digital marketing agency, websites, you know, what are we doing for this? It was a blog post that was written in 2015 that kept showing up, and it was called Feedback versus Testimonials. That was it. It was a about 300-word article that the CEO had written when she was ranting about something that consistently has shown up results now for the past year as one of the top research results on Google. So we're like, we have to leverage this in some way. We have content that is showing up that we are not capitalizing on. So we rewrote the article. We took that information and said, what are people actually looking for when they search feedback and testimonial? They were not looking for a rant that our CEO wrote back in 2015. We knew that. So our content writer took a closer look at what people's intents were, where did they go after they looked at this page, how were they interacting with this page, and she actually wrote an amazing piece of content that was, what is the difference between a feedback and a testimonial? How do you get both? How do you leverage those in your business? And then we put this little disclaimer at the end, and you may have seen it as you're going through blogs. But we put editor's note. This post was originally published in July 2015 and was updated in May 2019 for accuracy to include new information. And our views on it have gone up since then. So we're still getting views on it. We're still showing up. If you go to Google after this and search feedback testimonials, this is going to be probably the #1 or #2 result. But we were able to take that content that we thought was dead and kind of give it new life based on the information we were able to use, based on looking at the SEO that was coming from it, and not just saying, oh, we have a piece of content from 2015, it probably needs to be archived, no longer relevant. We didn't have to do all that. We could kind of sit there and tweak it and say, this is still good content, just doesn't serve the purpose that it did before. Last thing I wanted to touch on was this idea of content strategy and content marketing. Because once you have a good SEO and once you have a good content strategy set up, content marketing is a really easy next step. So while we've got our content strategy, which is internal guidelines and governments, our high overview strategy that we're going to use, we've got content marketing on the other side, which is the tactics we're going to use. We've got our strategy and we've got our tactics. So our editorial calendar, creation of more content, curation of that content, and promotion and iteration. So you've already got that content there, which is the first and hardest step. We can take that then over into content marketing and use that to share white papers, downloads, collect information if we want to from people who want that information. And so to do that, there's a couple steps. Know where you're going is the first one. Have some sort of plan for your content. And this can be short-term plan and say, oh, we want to do a 3-month campaign to promote this event that we have coming up. And we want to create our content around there and promote our content around there. Or it can be a longer-term roadmap where you're looking at over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to produce this or have this. But you can have a combination of those, but always have a plan that's going out. Again, think of that cartoon of we're going to create a blog and just put out content that's random information. It's a little bit harder to do this and have a good marketing strategy if you're going kind of off blindly. Next one is define your audience. So we're really good at thinking about our user personas and saying, okay, this is our audience, these are what our people are, as far as age-wise, demographics-wise. But I also want to remind you to think about 2 of the other pieces. So when I'm teaching in my marketing classes and I ask my students to do a target market, they are really, really good at remembering the demographics: race, gender, socioeconomic status. They are terrible at remembering psychographics and geographics, but they're also equally important, if not more important. So your psychographics are how people think and behave and act, what they like. So do they like short articles compared to long articles? Are they C-level executives who are like, I don't have time to read this white paper, or I need something shorter and a brief? How do they like to receive their information? Are they getting it on mobile versus desktop? One website we worked on, we found, had 85% of its traffic from mobile. So we decided to write all of the content for the website with the idea that it needed to be as easy to read on the phone and quick to read on the phone, and desktop users, 25%, but our mobile users were going to be the ones that we thought about. And then also our geographics. How can you look at where somebody is coming from when they access your information? You could even personalize it. I saw a website the other day that I was sitting there and it was a rainy day, and I logged in and it said, it's a rainy day, here's some ideas for what to do inside. and it personalized that content based on where I came from. So we can look at those geographies and say, how can we tailor this toward the zip code or the location or some way that we can kind of engage our users in a different way. Audit what you already have. Most of the time when we start with a content audit, we already have everything, really. We don't have much far to go. There is a session at 1 p.m. today on content audits. I think Dory Kellner is doing that, so if you're interested in that aspect, there is one this afternoon. But it's really good, instead of saying we need to start from scratch, we need to get all this content together, you probably already have it and just need to tweak it in some different ways so that your content and SEO align. Measure for success. Any of you have heard me talk before, I usually talk on analytics because I love measuring success and what's going on a website and getting those numbers and graphs. So don't forget to measure for those successes. Each piece of our content that we have should have its own goal, and you're tracking that goal. So again, if you've got feedback versus testimonials, and you put that out there and you're getting no results back, maybe we can look at why. A client of mine just published a blog post recently that got like 0 interaction on it. And the title was something like 20 words long. So we were able to go back to this client and say, can we rewrite the title to see if it's more engaging for people? And when we did that and re-put it out into the world, our engagement on it went up. So it wasn't the article that was bad, it wasn't the information, it was the way we were presenting and communicating. Analyze for trends. Like I said, I look at my analytics on a weekly basis, a quarterly basis, and a monthly basis. So I have different analytics that I look for at different parts. Most of the time, I'm not doing too much with them because I'm not looking to correct those spikes or divots. So going back to that weather report, I know there are going to be ups and downs in my website traffic. I know there's going to be ups and downs in my engagement. What I'm looking for is over the course of a quarter, is it going steadily down with no way to go back up? Or week over week, am I seeing those keywords that keep showing up week over week, and I need to do a little bit more digging into why are those keywords showing up when we weren't intending for them to? So I did want to share, we've got a couple more minutes left here, but I did want to share some of the resources that I use that might be helpful for you. The first one is Moz, and that's actually where I got most of the charts for this presentation because they are probably the top resource for anything SEO related. Highly recommend you go there. They do have free tools that you can use to search your website. They typically offer 10 free searches per month. And it will give you feedback on what keywords your site is ranking for, what your competitors' keywords. You can even compare backlinks between you and any of your competitors' sites to be able to see that, or to just kind of track what words are being used to find you. You can also get your domain authority there. So domain authority is a scale from 1 to 100. It's logarithmic, so it's a lot harder to go from 50 to 100 than it is to go from 1 to 50, but it gives you kind of an idea of how likely it is for your site to show up when somebody searches for it. So if your domain has a domain authority of 5, it's probably not going to show up in search results as much as somebody who has a domain authority of like Wikipedia with 95 to 99 on there. And that's another metric that kind of fluctuates throughout the time. But Moz is just a really great resource if you want to know anything about SEO. Another one is the Search Engine Journal. And they also have some good resources out there if you're trying to figure out how to marry that content with your SEO piece. And then HubSpot as well. HubSpot is really into content marketing. So they offer a lot of resources to help content creators better craft the content they're doing. They're the ones who came up with the term pillar pages and tested it out on their content and showed that Google really responded to this idea of pillar pages and topic clusters, and that has now become kind of an industry standard in organizing it. So HubSpot's a great resource for that. And then my email there down at the bottom, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, Or we've got it's 10:45, which was my goal to end then. So we probably have maybe 5 minutes before questions before we should get out and leave the room for the next person. Yeah.
Hopefully you can help us settle a debate in our office. Some of our senior staff versus younger staff have different views on video SEO, and
Okay.
trying to find kind of the sweet spot of words to attach within a page on a video.
On a video, okay.
Some think less is more in terms of like 1 or 2 sentences. We're thinking more in the hundreds of words, so I was curious if you have some views on that.
So the question was, for the recording, the question was about SEO best practices for video. So I actually have another question to follow up for you on that. Is that the only thing that's on the page then?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a standalone video, sometimes it's a video with an article attached to it.
Okay, so sometimes yes, sometimes no. And that would kind of be my answer going back there, is if it has, I still try to hit for at least 500 words on the page. Google is just going to look at anything that's under 300 words and say, this is not very deep content, people aren't going to get much out of it. So I always try to aim for that. If it's within another article, you're probably covered and don't need that much on there. But if it's just a standalone video on a page, I'd probably be adding some beef to it just to see, if we can get that up there a little bit more.
Thanks
Okay.
for having our back.
You mentioned looking at content we already have on our website and sort of reorganizing it and reworking the SEO for it. Would you recommend that we start with the content that's like getting 0 pickup via Google, or should we start with content that is already getting minimal pickup? We just want to improve it. Where do you think efforts are best spent?
So personally, I like a mixture. I like starting with the content that is already getting some pickup because it's motivating and it's a lot, it's one of those things you almost have to self-motivate yourself. So I will try to pick up a page that has, some of that content that's already showing up really well. Is like, how can we make it even better? And then once we get about a quarter of the way through it, kind of say, okay, what's something that's doing really badly? So we can kind of run those sort of concurrently, just so we stay motivated. Because they're both important to do, but if you start with the low performing stuff, personally, I've found that you kind of feel like you're banging your head against a wall and you don't want to keep doing it. So she's been raising her hand, yeah.
I just want to get your thoughts on how old content affects SEO. I've had coworkers say we need to leave every blog we've ever written on the site because it's going to help our SEO, and I kind of have to fight on and say, no, that blog post from 2008 isn't really doing that. So what is a good, archival point that we're going to use?
Sure. So what I have found is that Google likes old URLs, but not old content. And so that's why I recommend updating the old content, because the URL is already there. Google has already built SEO around that URL, so you're not starting from scratch. So that page probably has a pretty high page authority. So whatever you can update or refresh, update and refresh. Otherwise, archive it, because Google's going to look at that old content and say, yes, the URL is old, so it's got some relevancy built up to it, but it hasn't been updated in 10 years. It's probably not going to be relevant for the search. So if you do that updating process, you can kind of leverage both of those with new content and the old URL, that it says if this URL has stuck around, it's got some staying power, and you can kind of strike that balance.
How do redirects affect URL age?
They don't. So, that's a question we get a lot. It's basically, SEO calls it link juice. So whatever link juice that original one have is going to pass to the redirect one. And it's going to start building it up on its own as well. So we kind of try to run some concurrent. If we have redirects, we'll then start sharing it from the new one and not continue sharing it from the old one. So it takes Google a while to be able to, completely disregard that old one. So in the meantime, whatever link juice the original one has will be enough to feed it on until it can build up its own. Up in the back there.
I'm a developer, so I know nothing about it. But what I do know is that when we images, because you mentioned the alt.
Yeah.
And what we tend to do is we go by WCAG, and if it doesn't have whatever, it doesn't follow that, we'll automate the alt tag when we are doing the code. But then you images tend to be as descriptive as possible. So do you ever find that by being descriptive, you're actually breaking WCAG guidance?
It's a balance, and sometimes I have left them the automatic one because I can't come up with a better one that's descriptive and compliant. So typically how I do it is I let it be automatically generated, so we've got something to start with, and then if I notice something needs tweaking, I go in from there.
So as from a development perspective, we have tagging.
Mhm.
So if we actually automated that part, so we use the automation for whatever, and then we could also add a tag in with the logic, would that actually be helpful?
I think that probably would, yeah. Yeah. You had them down here.
Yeah, I always, how, from UX design, I was wondering how much do you probably put effort SEO?
What was that? I didn't hear the last part.
Far away effort affect SEO.
The more accessible the website is, the better the SEO. Google really wants, right now, Google really wants websites to be accessible and fast. So even if you don't have much content on it, if it's accessible and fast, Google is going to bump it up. So that's really kind of a push right now that Google is saying, you know, yes, we understand you've got all these other things going on your website, but it needs to be accessible and it needs to be easily gotten from a phone, poor internet connections, whatever. So yes, the better accessible it is, the better. Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than question, I have two additions
Okay.
to your presentation. Considering the audience, we are all have domain higher domain authorities in a part of government or like
Right.
profits. In your one of your presentation slides, you know, when you search, sometimes you have a little box on the right.
Okay, well, that was the,
Yeah, that's called knowledge panel. And
Yep.
we can, as the government authority, we can claim the ownership of that knowledge panel, which will add our SEO power a little bit more. So the Google knows that you literally own that keyword. Yes, that one.
yep, right there.
So like it's a very simple process, but it affects significantly. I mean, you
Yeah, right.
own that knowledge panel. So like as the government agencies, we kind of own those, but claiming that helps the SEO. And one of your comments on the personalization is the government agencies, we are very strict on personalization. And
Yes, I know that,
so many
yeah.
legal things. I talk to lawyers a lot and privacy officers, although I'm an architect. Even though we technically have the information, legally we can't use it. One of the
My presentation last year here at GovCon was on personalization on the government. So the recording is out there from last year. We had a really good conversation with people about what could be done if, yeah, that was,
Although technically you have the information, you can't make it very
well, one of the examples in our presentation last year that was brought up is I forget which exactly it was, but it was a New York governmental agency was using that information to show news based on where the visitor was coming from. So if they were coming from a certain zip code, it would show news and weather based on that zip code as compared to New York City. So if they were coming from a suburb, it would show that information. So they were using it in different ways. Sometimes it's not overt, but it can still be leveraged. All right, so I'm going to get out of here because I know the next group is going to get in here. If you do have any questions, feel free to let me know.